al-zalim and al-madlum, of a oppressor and the oppressed, do not change. The dynamics of how wealth can corrupt people, or people can become arrogant because of what Allah has bestowed upon them, or humbled because of what has been withheld from them, none of that changes. So subhanAllah, the study of human history, when you study arrogant nations and oppressed nations, arrogant tyrants and righteous people that rise up amongst the oppressed, people that see through the kingdom that has been given to them, which are very rare, the Suleiman alayhi salam, those that are like him, or whether you study the people who have been wronged to a point that they make it a point to advocate for those that are being wronged like them. All of these are stories that are so timeless that they can relate to us in every single generation, which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps them for us in the Quran, so that we can do tadabbur, so that we can contemplate over them. Now when it comes to the stories of the oppressed, and the stories of how Allah gives victory to the oppressed, as the Muslims have now just settled in Medina, after 13 years of persecution, or after hosting the people that have been persecuted for over a decade, they have yet to go into a battle with the people of Mecca, who have put their foots on their necks for over a decade in Mecca, who have taken their wealth, killed their family members, humiliated them, spit on them in public, all of that, without seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doing anything to those people in Mecca in their lifetimes just yet. And it is in that time period that Allah reveals to them the story of David and Goliath, the story of Talut and Jalut, Talut being Saul, Jalut being Goliath. It is in that time frame when they have just moved to Medina, not knowing that the Battle of Badr is going to come upon them sooner than they think. Because the Battle of Badr, of course, came out of circumstances that were not planned for. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 246 onwards for a few ayat, the story of Dawood alayhi salam and a wicked generation of Bani Israel that then went through a filtering process, a filtration process, because every nation goes through power and then becomes arrogant and then is humiliated, and then amongst the persecuted you have the righteous that rise up and a righteous generation, and Bani Israel is no exception to that. They go between these two poles. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to the Prophet ﷺ and the believers the story of a righteous generation of Bani Israel that arose out of a wicked generation of Bani Israel through the filtration process of power and oppression. And it's very powerful that that's being given to the Muslims, because they will witness that transition in their own lifetimes. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remind the believers in Medina after Badr about Badr. Once Badr takes place, the lesson that Allah gives them after Uhud, the lesson that Allah gives them after Tabuk, is not to recall an incident that they have never seen, but to recall something that they have seen. When Allah gave them Nusra wa antum adilla, while you were small, while you were oppressed, Allah gave you victory. Allah sent you angels because you were righteous. Your hearts were in the right place. Your minds were in the right place. You were connected in the right way, so Allah gave you victory. So Allah would remind them after Badr, of Badr, multiple times in the Quran, and us by extension. But here, they haven't yet faced Badr. And before I go to the story of David and Goliath, I want to make one thing very clear. As Muslims, we ascribe ourselves to the righteous on the basis of their righteousness and belief. And we distance ourselves from the wicked on the basis of their wickedness. Meaning what? When we read about the prophets of Bani Israel and the righteous of Bani Israel, we ascribe ourselves to them. And when we read about the wicked of any group of people, any nation, even if that might be your lineage or my lineage, we distance ourselves from them, because we are bound by faith and righteousness.